Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about another broken deck, another crazy, silly deck. This time we're going to be talking about Trix, also known as Necro Donate. That might be the better name for it, because there was a couple different versions of this deck, but the um, the super full powered Necropotence versions are the one we're going to be talking about today. And so we need to go back in time. We need to go back in time to around Urza's Destiny, right? So during Saga Block. So we're talking about even after, the big sort of combo exodus, right? Where we just keep getting like just jillions of combo decks, so we just ban a ton of cards. And it's like, okay, cards banned, decks go back to normal. Like Saga Mass Block is actually pretty fun. Lots of cool stuff going on there. So, yeah, even though, Saga is like a block known for all of its combo cards, stuff like Extended and Standard were actually pretty fun after, they banned a bunch of cards in both formats. So, but unfortunately for older formats, there was still unbelievably so still a lot of cards that were very difficult and I don't want to say problematic, but it's true. Very powerful cards. Um, and so we're gonna be looking back today on this time, late '99, early 2000, where funky stuff's going on. Really start learning a lot of lessons for the first time, sort of. At least Wizards of the Coast does, the DCI and all that, and its players and things like that too. Very important lessons. So yeah, let's get to it. All right, so this is basically the first, at least to my knowledge, the first actual real A plus B kind of combo thing, where you need like the two parts to win. A lot of, I think they're kind of, you could almost kind of look at some of the older decks and say like, oh, this is kind of like a two-card combo and da 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 da. But I think this is the first really good, clean, easy combo to support the Illusions Donate. And so this is like really the first modern version of it too, where we really were like, okay, let's go all in on this, and really see how much we can really break this. And spoiler alert, it was really broken. The deck was pretty silly. Um, I mean, you just have to look at the list. I mean, I know I've said this before, but you have to look at these decks a couple times because you just do like a double take. You're like, wait, how are all these fucking cards illegal? Like this is what's the scene? What's the context, right? We banned a bunch of different cards, right? Like 10 plus, at least in the last 6 months due to combo winter or whatever. So we've already banned a ton of stuff, and then this deck pops up, and it's like we still have all these like broken ass cards still around. It's like, how are these still there? Well, it's a couple of different things. First and foremost, um, again, I think this best sort of illustrates things is we get a reprint of Necropotence and Mana Vault in 5th edition. You're probably saying, what does this have to do with anything? Like, these cards were already legal and extended, blah, 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 blah. But the point is, why would they reprint these cards if they were very problematic? Especially, like, look at something like Mana Vault, right? Where it just didn't see that much play. I mean, it was fine. But there just wasn't anything to really break it. It was just a lot of times sort of seen as like a worse Dark Ritual. And Necropotence itself was a very fun card, very beloved card. People loved playing with it. This was like this is how black decks were often built around Necropotence for obvious reasons, as well as cards being designed around Necropotence and Dark Ritual too, right? So like this was a big thing. So these were fun cards. They didn't really break anything. And some of this was because of it's just a much smaller card pool, right? We don't have all the like really broken things we can do with these things. So it's mostly just like I'm playing Necropotence in my fair black deck. I'm playing Mana Vault in my Crawworm deck or something, right? Like, so these weren't really problematic cards. I mean, again, like the fear over Saga Block, right, with all was just obscene amounts of like broken decks, was kind of seen as, I think, like just a one of, right? It was just like, okay, whatever, no big deal. We go back to business as usual. We play our, demonic consultations and vampiric tutors and stuff, and everything's okie dokie. Um, so like a lot of these cards are very contextual, right? How good is a particular card? I mean, right, because these things don't operate in a vacuum. So, like Vampiric Tutor, pretty good. And if you're just playing the rock, right, you get your Recurring Nightmare, you get your Pernicious Deed, you get all sorts of stuff. Um, but this would all change very, very quickly once Donate was printed in Destiny, and this deck actually ended up becoming figured out very, very quickly. And of course, just like our everyone's favorite combo control deck, High Tide, this is very similar to that, except it's, well, much better. Obviously, being able to kill a lot earlier, typically, but just having just a better draw engine in general. Um, so yeah, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and take a look at the deck. All right, so here we go. This is just typical sort of Necropotence, Necrodonate sort of deck. I mean, 4 ofs of all your important cards, 4 Force, 4 Duress for protection, Donate Illusions, of course, Necros, Mana Vaults, a bunch of Ramp, Tutors, and some other additional disruption and things like that. And then the sideboard, of course. We'll get to that too. And of course, nothing too wonky, nothing too weird with the mana base, but yeah, lots of interesting stuff going on here. Although I just kind of want you to look at all of these cards. How many of these cards are actually banned in like Legacy or restricted in Vintage? I mean, it's unbelievable. Like, this is just a silly deck, a silly deck. So let's get to it. All right, so let's talk about the tutors and the card draw spells. Again, the two big tutors that are played is Demonic Consultation and Vampiric Tutor. Of course, Consult is basically 1 mana, instant speed, get whatever you want. Like, the deck is obviously built around Consultation. It played a full 4, which is sort of novel around this time. I mean, eventually people began to understand that Consultation didn't really have a downside. Like, there wasn't really a drawback. Especially if you built your deck in a way where you're playing all 4 ofs, like, it's basically impossible. Or it's very, very, very unlikely to whiff. I mean, this it's a 1 mana instant speed tutor for whatever you want. I mean, that's what more do you even need to say? When, like, if you want, I mean, there's no, like, a fair price for this would be like Diabolic Tutor. It's 2 black and 2 colorless, and that's, a sorcery. So it's like the gulf, the power of some of these cards are just, it's unbelievable. Again, same thing with Vampiric Tutor. This card is, I mean, literally just gets you anything. Obviously, there's no chance for it to screw you over. But also the nice thing is it does hide your cards from discard, which is quite good. Not much more to say there. Of course, Brainstorm also does a pretty good job of hiding your cards from discard. They only play 2 copies because, again, there's only so much space in the deck. You already have like a pile of actual tutors, right? And so you don't really need a ton of raw card drawing. But this does let you like put stuff back, shuffle away, that kind of stuff. Obviously, Brainstorm and Vampiric Tutor are a pretty good combo. So there's a lot of good stuff going on here. And of course, last, but certainly not least, one of the reasons why the deck was just so insane is because Necropotence was in it. This is like probably the best Necro deck, right? Probably. I mean, there's a lot of really busted Necro decks, so it's hard to say, but this one really took advantage of it because obviously Illusions of Grandeur gives you 20 life, sort of negating any kind of downside of Necropotence, and being able to just pay a ton of life, draw your combo, draw into your Force of Wills and everything else. I mean, this is just, it does everything you want. And it also, again, so not only is it like a ridiculous combo card, but it's like a card drawing engine for a control deck. It's I mean, it's unparalleled, right? Like this is one of the reasons why you're able to really play the combo role as well as the control role. So not only you can just outdraw like basically every deck, like just every deck. It doesn't matter. You have tons of cards that are free, literally fucking free, like because all you could just pitch cards in your hand to them. So it's like one of the main constraints of these Necropotence decks is like how fast you're able to deploy your cards. Um, but if you play a bunch of free spells like like Force of Will and Contagion and Unmask and so on, like I mean, it's just it's just absurd. It's absurd. This is not. It's unreal. Absolutely unreal. And this is one of the reasons why they didn't really want to ban Necro for so long, because the card's so fun. There's obviously like a lot of deck building requirements. There's obviously disadvantages, like, again, versus red decks, you can have a tough time because the more cards you draw, the more likely you are just to be able to get burned out randomly. So there was a lot going on here, but obviously in this deck, I mean, there's no downside. You're just slamming illusions. You've gained 1,000,000 life, and yeah, it's just absurd, just totally absurd. Okay, now here we go. Talk about the combo itself in particular. We got illusions and donate. Illusions, of course, you basically play it. 4 mana for that, 3 mana for this. Of course, we've got a lot of acceleration to help pay for those costs. But again, we don't need to go off on like turn 3 every game or whatever. We can, again, slow roll it. Again, we have all sorts of different cards to interact with other decks. But basically, you play illusions and then you donate it to it. I mean, again, this is pretty simple. Your opponent can't pay the upkeep and they they lose the 20 life. Of course, you get to keep the 20 life after you donate it, of course. So yeah, pretty simple. I mean, there's not much else to say. It's they can't keep paying for the upkeep for very long, and of course you can always just hoodwink the card, so you can bounce it back to your hand or something, if they have a bunch of mana or you didn't want to wait or whatever. So yeah, pretty ridiculous, pretty obvious, right? Like this is like the worst part of the deck is the combo. I mean, obviously it's 2 cards, it gains you a bunch of life, and then your opponent immediately loses. Like it's a little dirtily, a little bit, but again, there's a ton of mana ramp and protection and things like that. It's about as compact as a combo that you can really get. And of course, to protect it, we have our good friend Duress and Force of Will. Duress always doing a lion's share of good work in combo decks, and control decks and aggro decks too, just disrupting your opponent, seeing what's up, what kind of cards they have in their hand, what they're really playing with. So that's obviously not too strange. Again, Force of Will here, again, really powerful with Necropotence. Um, just completely just insane in this deck. This, again, is one of the few times where Force of Will does a heel turn, right? And all it does is just protect your ridiculous combo decks, right? Protects your combo. Because most of the time, Force of Will does good things, right? It stops your opponent from, like playing like a 4 mana thing, like their Jace or whatever. You can counter it for free. So it'll do stuff like that. Like you can use it as tempo plays to prevent them from removing your, Tarmogoyf for something, right? Like these kinds of things. But in this instance, and in a couple other instances, we see Force of Will where it's like, okay, free spells are just too good, especially when you can negate any sort of cost to it, right? So the 1 life and the removing a card, exiling a card isn't a big deal when you have Necropotence and Illusion to gain a bunch of life and draw a bunch of cards. So yeah, definitely way too good here. Obviously, just ridiculous. I mean, just totally ridiculous in this deck. I mean, there's not really much else to say. Everything's pretty cut and dry. Like everything in here is just like it's like 11 out of 10 power level, right? Pretty silly. And of course, the cards that we are using to ramp this stuff out is our good friend Dark Ritual and Mana Bolt. These are obviously help pay for the requirements for the combo itself. Or Dark Ritual is also quite good at ramming through turn 1 Necro, or you can go like Rit, like Duress, Necro, or you can protect it with Force of Will. It's just so good here, just so good. Really lets you get a ton of mana, lets you kill much faster than you have any right to, right? Trying to resolve 7 mana worth of cards. Mana Vault, same thing, except you can actually get like a little bit of a down payment, right? So you can get 3 full mana and not just like 2 net, right? Because you can just play it and then untap and then play a land and then go off. Not much more to say about Mana Vault. I guess it does ping you, which might be important to know with Necro, but again, just like the absurd amount of life you get with Illusions of Grandeur, it's not that big of a deal. And of course, I just wanted to point out, why are they playing Gemstone Mine? Well, again, because they really want, you want a lot of blue and black. Missing a land drop isn't a big deal when you have all this ramp, and you can just draw into extra lands very easily, and you don't really want to play something like City of Brass to ping you more, or Undiscovered Paradise, which bounces it back to your hand, which can be a bit awkward when you're trying to do like the control thing. That could be kind of annoying. But Gemstone Mine stays in play for a couple turns, and that's usually good enough. So this is just something, just a minor deck building thing, but I think it is pretty interesting, kind of to note that like even a deck like this, which is just like a fucking sledgehammer of power, like you still have these kind of interesting sort of choices in here. So you know, maybe so other people might just be like, oh well, just play more basics or whatever, but this gives you significantly more flexibility with very little downside, I'd say. So quite good, quite good. Okay, and now we have the sideboard cards. Of course, we already talked about Hoodwink a little bit, and that's of course a main deck and sideboard card. But Negator, again, continuing its long tradition of being a of just frustrating different decks, right? Because like you have no creatures main deck, but then you can board into Negator, and just so it's like, do we keep our removal in? Do we take it out? Like what's this guy doing? So he can come in and out like rather dynamically, right? He doesn't have to like come in if you think that you know you can just screw with your opponent that way. And so like it increases the chances where they're just like trying to counteract your plans that you may or may not bring in, you know, and then it's just, you know, it's really complicates things. So Negator, very good here. You know, 4-turn clock by itself, quite good, quite good. Unmask, again, just this is just awesome against more decks, right? Like it lets you burn through extra cards you don't need, lets you, you know, see what your opponent's doing. So this is really good. And of course, there's no life cost in this either, so that's quite good. Here we have Contagion. Nice thing about Contagion, it's an instant. So if you Necro up to 10 or something, you can really only have to discard 1 or 2 cards maybe if any, right? Because you can Contagion their creatures. Contagion very good against a lot of the Stompy decks, the Sly decks or whatever. They'll have stuff like Elvish Lyrist, you know, to destroy your stuff. But I mean, like, this is just, it's not going to work, right? You can just Contagion it. So, yeah, sorry guys, nice try. Hydro Blast, of course, against the anyone that's bringing in Red Elemental Blast, or of course against any of these Sly decks. Very good there. And the Null is quite good against, obviously, artifacts and enchantments is a good way to fight other Trix decks. You can annul their illusions, of course, or also their Necro, which is almost, I would say, probably actually more important. So, yeah, this is all, again, like very cheap stuff, very powerful removal, good in all sorts of different situations, really great sideboard, and of course the Negator itself, you know, just being a good like, just like, oops, I guess you know, countered my thing, I guess I'll just slam this Negator and then kill you. So quite good, pretty good. So what ended up happening? What ended up happening? Obviously this deck was basically tier 0, and we got Dark Ritual Mana Vault banned. Dark Ritual obviously causing a lot of problems. Mana Vault 2, which is, you know, similar enough to Dark Ritual where they're like, oh, this is not going to do anything good. You know, obviously it'd be pretty silly in a lot of the Tinker style decks. But yeah, so they banned Ritual Mana Vault in March of 2000, basically in response to this deck to try and make it not ridiculous. And then a year later, they're like, shit, well, I guess we gotta... So they bit the bullet on a bunch of different cards. Necro, of course, because of this deck, and I guess other decks too, but primarily because of Trix. It's just, it's not a it's not a reasonable card most of the time, right? Replenish, another engine card for the replenish style opalescence decks. Survival because of the million different survival decks, and of course demonic consultation because there's no reason not to play 4 of them. So yeah. So the deck did end up surviving the first ban, of course. And then, then they banned Necro, and it still actually existed even after they banned Necro. It turned into it dropped black entirely for red, and used stuff like Sapphire Medallion as like cost reduction, and leaned a little bit harder into the control role. But yeah, deck was actually still pretty good up until about, was it 2002, 2003, well, 2002, I guess, yeah, when Onslaught came in, like the dual lands in 4th and 5th edition rotated out, I believe, and Ice Age and Mirage as well. I think. I might be wrong about that, but yeah, so it rotated in about 2002. Obviously Illusions Grandeur rotated out. The combo doesn't work without Illusions, so the deck died then. But it survived a bunch of bannings. It was actually pretty good, honestly. I mean, there were other decks that were pretty good against it, but they didn't really pop up until a lot later, right? Because we don't see anything like Miracle Grow until Plane Shift, right? When Queer and Dryad comes out, and then especially during Odyssey, when we have like the Threshold creatures, stuff like that. So Werebear, Nimble Mongoose, that kind of stuff. Mystic Enforcer. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. But of course, this was, I mean, far past the time. Like they had already banned Necro and Dark Ritual and Mana Vault and stuff by that time, so it was a much weaker deck than the Grow decks were competing against. But yeah, so this deck was pretty silly. Probably the last like really busted deck in sort of the old extended, although I guess there's a couple different old extended formats, right? Um, but that's okay. That's okay. No biggie. So yeah, it was pretty interesting. Actually, let's take a look at the blue-red version of this deck real quick. Yeah, so what we have here is basically just leaning a little bit harder into like the control role. We have like the intuition, AK engine, right, for card drawing. Um, we have merchant scroll, of course, to search those out, search out fire and ice. Got some brainstorm, capsize, impulse, a lot of good stuff, a lot of pretty interesting stuff going on here, and of course the Sapphire Medallion introduced the cost of things, and of course illusions and donate, and the sideboard is teched against all sorts of different things. But yeah, deck still survived. I think Kai Bude actually won, was it Worlds or some other big event? Maybe it was a GP with the blue-red version, this version of Trix. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff. Deck was pretty good. Obviously, it's a little it'd be a hard sell today because like especially without Mana Vault and Necro, it just like getting your illusions countered or destroyed or something would just be like it happened too frequently, it'd be too hard to recover. So, but definitely a very powerful deck at the time. Like where just every card in it's just like this is awesome. All these cards are great, So that was pretty neat. But yeah, that's basically it, guys. So yeah, I mean this is a very simple deck, right? Resolve your illusions, cast or donate on it, let your opponent die. Yeah, like it's pretty sweet. It's a pretty simple deck. Like you just do everything, just draw all the cards, like counter and discard all of their cards, and then, and then donate the illusions to them, and it's yeah, pretty silly, but it was a cool deck. It was a cool deck. So yeah, so well, is this no, maybe this is this the last one that I'm gonna do on an old extended deck, an old one? I'm not sure, but there's lots of different decks we can talk about still, lots of stuff still lined up. But yeah, so thanks for stopping by, guys. I hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, and have a nice day.